Hey, welcome to another edition of Rant and Robin. Today we're going to talk about the Watchmen graphic novel. Alright, here's the non-spoiler version of the graphic novel. This novel deals with a group of heroes who are coming out of retirement because of the death of a friend of theirs named the Comedian. The novel brings up some very good points, such as dealing with Rorschach's view of the very black and white world, causing us to ask ourselves if there is truly anything such as right and wrong. The majority of the severe language seems to arise around this character, with G-Diet being used 2 to 3 times, the F word a few times, but mostly milder words such as the S word. Still, the words never appear to be used out of context and or overused. The novel deals with Night Owl's struggle to return to his role as a hero and a blossoming relationship, which are where the majority of the sex scenes in this book show up, which for the most part are more hinted at than shown. Ozymandias is a former hero who has now gone more of a corporate route with his former hero days and struggles with the concept of how to make the world a truly better place. Dr. Manhattan is the character who has the most of the nude scenes, as he becomes less connected with the humans around him and begins to walk around in the nude, feeling himself to be more godlike. Alright, if you plan on reading the graphic novel, now would be the time to turn off your computers, as the rest of this video will contain spoilers. The novel opens up with a murder scene where we cannot tell who the murderer is. The person killed ends up being the hero named Comedian. He is beat up in his home and thrown out the window, dying upon impact to the ground. Now we meet Rorschach, who is investigating the murder of the comedian. He is in fact the person to first find out that the seemingly regular civilian who is murdered is actually the comedian. Rorschach heads over to his friend's place, who used to be the Night Owl too, now retired. Night Owl struggles over wanting to go back to being a superhero to help find the murderer of the comedian, but for now chooses to not join Rorschach. Rorschach chooses to head over to the now retired Ozymandias, who owns a large company that sells toys based off of Ozymandias' superhero days. Ozymandias seems uninterested in what Rorschach has to say. Rorschach heads over to Dr. Manhattan, who currently is seeing/dating Silk Spectre 2, who is the daughter of the first Silk Spectre. Manhattan refuses to listen to Rorschach and ends up transporting Rorschach out of his base of operation onto the street nearby while Rorschach is still talking. During this time, Silk Spectre 2 and Night Owl 2 end up going out for a casual dinner together. They both talk about how much they don't miss being superheroes, but the subtext here indicates that they both do. Silk Spectre 2 then goes to visit her mother, who was the first Silk Spectre. Her mother reveals that the comedian raped her one day in the trophy room. This causes tension between Silk Spectre 2 and the comedian, even causing Silk Spectre to blow up at the comedian shortly after she finds out about the rape at a dinner. That was one of the last dinners before the comedian was killed. While at the funeral, Dr. Manhattan recalls his first meeting with the comedian, and liking the fact that the comedian seemed also to be detached from the human world. During this time, Rorschach goes to interview Moloch, a former enemy of the comedian, and in one of the more unexplainably violent scenes in the book, interviews and breaks Moloch's hand. Moloch denies any connection to the murderer. During this time, Silk Spectre 2 ends up walking out on Dr. Manhattan after being tired of the fact that he is unable to connect with her emotionally. Silk Spectre ends up going over to Night Owl 2's place, and they end up going out to talk, and despite denying that they love crime fighting, they end up fighting some gangsters. During this time, Dr. Manhattan appears on TV and is blamed for several of his former friends developing cancer. When he is bombarded by questions about how he feels about this, he tries to escape back to headquarters, only to find a workman putting a biohazard warning on his door. This causes him to angrily teleport off to Mars. During this time, we get the origin of Dr. Manhattan as he recalls his life. He used to be a watchmaker until his dad pushed him away from that career toward a career in science. One day he was working at a plant and ended up leaving his jacket in a chamber that ended up tearing his body apart. Later, he was seen first as a brain, then a floating circulatory system, a muscled skeleton, before finally appearing as a blue creature after having fully reassembled his body. He then recalled being used in the Vietnam War, and by his sheer power was able to end the war. Then in 1977, the Keene Act was passed, banning vigilantism, or basically dressing as a superhero and fighting crime without a police badge. A few heroes managed to stay working if they were willing to do so under the banner of the government. Night Owl 2 retired instead of risking being put in prison. Rorschach refused to retire as he made obvious when he left a note on a beaten criminal with simply the word "never" followed by an exclamation point. Meanwhile, Dr. Manhattan builds a large building that resembles a gear from a watch on the planet Mars using just his powers. During this time, Ozymandias is seemingly attacked by a hired gun. When he tries to question the gunman dies, seemingly having swallowed a death capsule. Rorschach heads back to Moloch's house for more questioning, only to find him dead and that he has been led into a trap as someone has sent the police an anonymous tip that Rorschach is at Moloch's place. Rorschach is captured, and his mask is pulled off, revealing that he was in fact the red-haired guy we saw earlier in the novel carrying an "End is Near" sign. If you don't believe me, go back and check. Rorschach meets with a prison psychologist who uses the blot test, which we find out is the inspiration for Rorschach's identity. We find out Rorschach was the son of a prostitute who beat him on a regular basis. The prison psychologist begins to become severely depressed after dealing with Rorschach, so much so that it even affects his own marriage. During this time, things heat up, both literally and figuratively, as Silk Spectre 2, upon trying to light a cigarette, accidentally activates the flamethrowers on the back of Night Owl 2's ship. Shortly after this, Night Owl and Silk Spectre begin talking, and before you know it, they are making love. Night Owl suggests that they go out in costume and fight some crime. After that again, the pair makes love. Then Night Owl asks Silk Spectre to help him bust Rorschach out of prison. They break into prison and manage to get Rorschach free. Shortly after they get back home, Dr. Manhattan appears and Silk Spectre and him take off to Mars, so that she may convince him to help them find the murderer of the comedian and save humanity. During this time, we find out that the first Night Owl has just been murdered on Halloween night by a group of gangster teens who hate heroes. Meanwhile, in space, we have a slightly humorous account where Dr. Manhattan forgets that Silk Spectre needs to breathe, as she is unable to breathe in space. At first, it appears she is unable to convince him to come help, as he does not, quote, have any stake in it. Finally, he realizes what a miracle the human is and decides to come help, and they head back to Earth. Around this time, Rorschach and Night Owl 2 deduce that Ozymandias is behind everything. Ozymandias confesses to killing the comedian when the comedian discovered his plan to wipe out half of the population of New York by pretending that an alien invasion had come, while in fact setting off a nuclear bomb. When they threaten to stop him, he tells them that he set everything in motion about 35 minutes ago. Rorschach and Night Owl too realize they are now too late. Half of the population is killed in a nuclear explosion, disguised as an alien invasion, all set up by Ozymandias. He tells them that now the world will unite under him and finally be at peace. The other heroes decide that this is better than exposing Ozymandias' plan. Rorschach is unconvinced and leaves to head back to the United States, but Dr. Manhattan confronts him and upon realizing he will not change his mind, kills him. After this, the next scene is at Christmas time. We find out that Silk Spectre and Night Owl, now in disguise, are going to travel and live together like a married couple. Silk Spectre then tells her mom she knows who her dad was. Her mom admits to having had a brief relationship or fling with the comedian, and that he was in fact her father.